Good morning. Welcome to Business 360, where business, markets, and the economy come into full view. I'm Margaux Salcedo, and this is the Bilyonaryo News Channel. President Ferdinand Marcos Junior orders faster action on flood control, while the Public Works Department clarifies that Davao has a 2 billion peso allocation in the proposed budget. Water is becoming big business, with top tycoons looking far outside Metro Manila. Joining us is Doctor Guillermo Tabios III, Professor of the Department of Civil Engineering and Director of the National Hydraulic Research Center at UP Diliman. And a global bond sell-off is leaving governments to pay the highest borrowing costs in decades. President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. has urged the Department of Public Works and Highways to move faster on flood control projects. That's according to DPWH Secretary Vince Dizon, who says the government now wants both faster implementation and better coordination with local governments. Dizon said LGUs have been complaining for years that flood projects were built without their knowledge.
Sisigundaan ko lang ulit, no? Pagpasok ko sa DPWH, ang sabi ng Pangulo, kailangan coordinated tayo ng tama sa mga LGU natin. No? Kasi alam nyo naman, yung isa sa mga paulit-ulit na reklamo ng mga LGUs natin, itong mga nakaraang taon, lalo na sa flood mitigation projects, hindi kino-coordinate sa kanila. In most cases, like Quezon City, wala kaming ipapasok na project dito na hindi coordinated at hindi, hindi alam ng LGU at hindi kiniklear ng mga LGU.
The push for speed follows the flood control scandal, which forced a reassessment of infrastructure spending, triggering a slowdown in public construction. The DPWH clarifies that more than 2 billion pesos in flood mitigation projects are included for the Davao region in the proposed 2027 national budget. The clarification comes after ACT Teachers Party List Representative Antonio Tino questioned the apparent absence of specific flood control allocations for Region 11. The DPWH says the region's district engineering offices may not show individual flood control allocations, but Region 11 still has more than 2 billion pesos set aside for priority flood mitigation works. The projects include drainage systems and river basin works across the region. Tropical Depression Neneng has slightly intensified, enhancing the habagat and bringing heavy rains across western Luzon. Neneng was last spotted moving northwestward over the sea east of Batanes and is not expected to directly affect the country. But its effect on the habagat is already being felt, with heavy to intense rains expected today in Zambales, Bataan, and Occidental Mindoro. Moderate to heavy rains are also expected over Metro Manila, Rizal, Laguna, and other parts of Luzon. In other news, the Department of Finance is open to reducing or removing taxes if the lost revenue is replaced by other sources. This follows proposals to cut value-added tax to ease the impact of soaring fuel prices on Filipinos. Go said the statutory VAT rate is 12%, but exemptions bring the effective rate down to about 6%.
My categorical position on any tax removal is I'm not opposed to any tax removal for as long as a replacement revenue source is identified. I am neutral to all the taxes, but we do have a national expenditure budget of 7.2 trillion, which we have to fund. So if we remove any tax measure, the request is that Your Honor identify another tax source.
The Finance Department will also study a proposal for a 1% tax on every 1 billion pesos in taxable income of billionaires. The government is also considering higher taxes on expensive cars and other non-essential goods as part of its revenue measures. After the break, we'll speak with the director of the National Hydraulic Research Center, Doctor Guillermo Tabios III, about the country's water problems from flooding to packed silica. Stay with us on Business 360. Welcome back to Business 360. I'm Margaux Salcedo. A global bond sell-off is pushing borrowing costs to their highest in decades, leaving governments to pay more for debt amid inflation jitters. In the U.S., 30-year Treasury yields hit 5.327% on Tuesday. That's a 19-year high, as talks to end the U.S.-Iran war stalled. In Japan, the 10-year yield climbed to its highest in 30 years. Here at home, the Bureau of the Treasury raised 25.2 billion pesos from the reissuance of two bonds. It fully awarded 20 billion pesos in 3-year paper at an average yield of nearly 7%. Demand reached 50 billion. Higher oil prices, a weaker peso, and July inflation at 6.2% all keep the pressure on Philippine borrowing costs. But there could be relief ahead. The government expects foreign demand to pull yields down when Philippine bonds join a major emerging market index in January. Global oil prices are climbing again a day after a ceasefire between the U.S. and Iran lapsed with no deal in place. The benchmark Brent crude is now trading past $90 per barrel. U.S. President Donald Trump said there are no talks with Iran going on and none scheduled. He said the naval blockade of Iranian ports remains in full force and that the strait is open and operating with all water mines removed or detonated. Iran's top negotiator says the Strait of Hormuz will not reopen until Washington releases Iran's frozen assets, lifts sanctions on its oil and gas, and ends the blockade of its ports. Jollibee is expanding its Tim Ho Wan business in the U.S. Metro Pacific is not sold on the MRT3 deal, and the president and CEO of HSBC Philippines is pushing for more private investment in infrastructure. Joel Caballero has the details.
From Chicken Joy to Dim Sum, Jollibee is serving up a bigger bet on the U.S. market. The food giant is buying out its Japanese partner WDI from their North American venture, a 30% stake in Tim Ho Wan's business there, for just over $5 million. That takes Jollibee to full ownership in North America with the freedom to run, build, and franchise the dim sum brand across the region on its own terms. And the company is moving to scale up fast. From 5 U.S. stores once the deal closes, Jollibee wants 20 by 2028. It takes over Tim Ho Wan locations in New York and Hawaii and assumes management of stores in Las Vegas and Texas. In Japan, it's the other way around. WDI is buying Jollibee's 30% of their venture there for about $1 million. Tim Ho Wan stays the franchisor. Both deals still need regulatory clearance and are expected to close by the end of September. On the infrastructure front, Metro Pacific isn't ready to jump on the government's MRT3 partnership just yet. Chairman and ultra-bilyonaryo Manuel V. Pangilinan says the company will review the financial terms before deciding whether to bid. His hesitation comes from experience. Metro Pacific already runs LRT Line 1 and by his own account, it's losing money. The government is structuring MRT3 as a public-private partnership after the previous agreement expired in July of last year, handing full ownership of the line's assets to the state. The Transportation Department says at least 26 Japanese firms expressed interest at a market sounding in Tokyo. And as the government looks for more private capital, HSBC Philippines President and CEO Sandeep Upal says the money is there. What's needed now, he says, is execution. Upal is urging the government to replicate the model used for NAIA, where the airport's operations and maintenance were turned over to a private concessionaire in 2024. He says that deal gave business and investors confidence that big infrastructure projects can actually get done. He points to the North-South Commuter Railway, the Cavite-Bataan Interlink Bridge, and New Clark City as projects that could move faster with private sector help. With government having limited room to borrow, Upal says private capital can help foot the bill. And he points to one number as proof the cash is sitting idle. Philippine banks have lent out less than 80% of what they hold in deposits. Joel Caballero, Bilyonaryo News Channel.
Water demand is rising as businesses and new industries expand across the Philippines, putting more pressure on the country's water and wastewater systems. To discuss the challenges and opportunities ahead, we're joined by Doctor Guillermo Tabios III of the UP National Hydraulic Research Center. Welcome to Business 360, Dr. Tabios.
Good morning, Yusek Margaux.
Thank you so much for joining us, even in this weather.
Yes.
So it has been flooding and raining non-stop.
Yes.
Is this already an effect of climate change, and do we already have a water crisis?
First of all, as far as climate change, yes, because of global warming, we see a lot of extremes already, like so much extreme rainfall, high side, and then of course no rainfall. So we have droughts for that matter. So as far as the major moisture that comes in the Philippines is coming from the Pacific Ocean, as well as from Indian Ocean. So typhoons usually come from Pacific Ocean, typhoon rainfall. But habagat, these are southwest monsoon, they come from Indian Ocean. So if you have global warming, you have warming of the oceans, more evaporation, and if the winds go to the Philippines coming from Pacific or from southwest monsoon winds getting to Philippines, then you have plenty of rain. Now, of course, we have this what we call ocean oscillation indices. The ENSO, El Nino, Southern Oscillation, which is associated with the Pacific Ocean Oscillation indices. And then you have the Indian Ocean Dipole, is an Indian Ocean Oscillation Index. I think the Indian Ocean Dipole Index is a good indicator for habagat, which happens between August to September. So the El Nino is a much more better indicator of we have droughts, which is between January to maybe May. So you can decide, do you want drought or you want
That's
rainfall?
quite scary. Yes, but of course
So then you
we
have-
want to make we want all of these floodings to stop. But
Yes.
you know, Doctor, the irony is that in spite of all of this rain, there's a statistic that says that out of the 115 million population of the Philippines, 75 million people don't have access to potable water. Is
Yes.
that real, and what can we do about it?
In the Philippines, I would say 90% of the country really relies on groundwater as a water supply for domestic or even commercial.
Groundwater meaning you bore a hole through the ground and you extract the water from
the
there.
ground. But Metro Manila, for example, I would say maybe 10% of the country's population, 12, 15 million out of the 150 you mentioned, we rely on surface water more than groundwater. I
From
think
Angat Dam.
that's one. And then we have Laguna Lake as another source. And we have the incoming Upper Wawa Dam. So when you talk about in northern Philippines, you have very distinct wet and dry season. So how do we build and we have more reliable domestic water supply coming from surface water? If 6 months a year we have no rain, the other 6 months you have rain. So we have to impound them. We have to build reservoirs. If I
We
may
can
say so.
collect this rainwater and
Yes.
then we can be able to recycle it through the creation of these reservoirs. Is that correct?
Not necessarily use recycled water, but I'm talking about surface water from the rivers or from rain to the rivers to the reservoirs. But if you wanted to recycle wastewater, just like Singapore, we can recycle with new technologies. Nowadays, they have this membrane technology to treat water. It can even have it's basically a membrane, which is like a screen that can separate bacteria or even some viral
Lilinisin po ng
pathogen.
husto.
Lilinisin also. Not only removing inorganic materials, but organic materials. That level of treatment.
You mentioned Singapore. So Singapore has had such a success story
Yes.
with respect to
They call it
water.
new water. You call it.
Yes.
You can buy them in bottle nowadays.
So actually, Singapore is able to use tap water from the ocean, and then they have this new water. What is the role that these reservoirs play, and can the Philippines catch up with Singapore?
You know, if you think about Singapore, it's really a flat area. But how they impound water, they put gates in the rivers. So the rivers themselves serve as reservoirs. So we can do something like that. We'll use the river to impound water and then use it when you don't, during the dry
But
season.
do we have enough reservoirs in the Philippines?
Actually, in the Philippines, there's only one major reservoir which is multi-purpose for purposes of domestic water supply, irrigation, hydropower. That's Angat. The rest of the major reservoirs, there's only 6 of them: San Roque, Magat, Pantabangan, and so on. They're multi-purpose, but only for irrigation, hydropower, and then maybe flood control functions, but not domestic water supply. In the early 60s, there was a report from the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation. We commissioned them to identify potential sites for reservoir. They have identified over 100 large reservoirs that we can build in the Philippines. But so far, they only build those Pantabangan, Angat, Magat, San Roque, and then you have those 5 in particular.
I was reading up on Singapore's water story, and they have around 17 reservoirs. How many do we have here in the Philippines compared to that?
The major one, as I mentioned, 5, San Roque, Angat, Magat, Pantabangan, and then you have maybe 200 small reservoirs for irrigation, not for domestic water supply. There are maybe a few here, 1 or 2 or something. But like if you compare to Japan or Korea or even Vietnam, they have like over a dozen major reservoirs with a domestic water supply purpose.
So we have to catch
And
up.
they have like 4,000 to 5,000 small reservoirs.
Ang dami po.
Ang dami. You're
Yeah.
talking about thousands. And in the Philippines, the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation, way back in 1962 report, they have identified, like, as I mentioned, over 100 major reservoirs. When I talk about major reservoir, from a hydrological point of view, we say hydrologically large reservoir, where you try to contain the annual inflow for the rest of the dry season, can cover the dry season. And it will be beyond a year's storage available. So we can then cover, if you have a dry year, you can still cover the water need during the dry year.
Not just for irrigation, but also for potable water.
Yes, but I'm talking about a large reservoir, large enough to cover beyond a year's storage.
Well,
So-
our businessmen, some of our biggest tycoons, Enrique Razon, Manny Pangilinan, Lucio Co, are looking into wastewater and provincial water. So do you think they would be able to address these needs that we have mentioned?
Wastewater recycling for domestic water supply, for drinking water, may be quite expensive. Like, as I mentioned about membrane technology, you have to pump into that membrane to derive the clean water on the other side of the membrane. So that may still be a little bit expensive for that matter. But I would think surface water from rivers, build reservoirs, that's still a cheaper option if I think about it.
So usually, of course, we have our usual companies, but the private capital that will be infused by our tycoons, is this what we need right now?
I think so. Like, I've done work for, of course, the Upper Wawa. I did study on that. The Kaliwa, I did study on those reservoirs. But we need more studies, for surface water. I think groundwater, you can extract groundwater, but only at a certain amount, because some of them have been overtapped over-extracted. But in a given city, maybe you need so much because of the population increase and so on, and maybe businesses, industrialization, and commercial centers. But groundwater is only limited as far as the
But actually,
available
for the Singapore water story, they
Yeah.
also have imported water. They're getting water from Malaysia.
From Malaysia,
And
yeah.
then it goes into their reservoir. There's a big reservoir from Malaysia. It connects to them.
Yeah.
Should we also explore doing that?
We don't really have opportunity as far as trans-basin from other countries, because we are one, contiguous. I mean, Philippines is a
An archipelagic
remote
country.
archipelagic country. But definitely, like for example, there's plenty of water in Benguet and in the Cordilleras, or on the other side
Yes.
of the Sierra Madre on Cordillera, and then the Caraballo Mountains. Maybe we can really do trans-basin transfers. Even Pantabangan has a lot of water, or even Pampanga River. Maybe we should start moving water from Pampanga River to Metro Manila.
Can it be done?
It can be done. It's only like 30, 40 kilometers.
But speaking of Pampanga, one thing that they were looking at actually in Tarlac is the pack silica. And there's a lot
Yeah.
of hesitation with pack silica because in the United States, there's been a lot of controversy with respect to the water consumption that the data centers will be eating up. Although the chairman of the BCDA has already stated that there won't be any data centers anymore for the pack silica project. Manganganin po ba yung tubig natin dito sa pack silica?
I've been reading about that. First of all, I think the major locators or outfit there will be semiconductor manufacturing. They would still need a lot of water, but they were talking about 180 million liters per day that they will require, and then 3 gigawatts of power. The 180 is less than 5% of Metro Manila's 4,200 MLD, 4,200 MLD. But if you locate it a little bit in that area, then the water available will be not quite groundwater, but maybe from there's two rivers that I know, Sacobia, and then you have the Pasig Potrero, and then you have and so on, surface water. Perhaps you can move some water there. So I don't know exactly. 180 may be just enough available, but that will be just for them. What about the cities like Clark and so on? They also need water for that matter. So yes, they will consume quite a lot of water. But I think the bigger issue there is the ancestral domain, which is inside the 1620 hectares. And
Yes,
then
of course.
You have this, perhaps some ecological, impacts or environmental impacts, where you would have this wastewater, for example, from the manufacturing,
But they
cream and
said
so
that
on.
for pack silica, they will create their own kind of ecosystem and everything will be confined there. They'll build their own energy system, they'll build their own water system. Is that possible for them to do?
I think they're talking about, I think I mentioned, President Marcos mentioned about these nuclear power plants, modular nuclear power plants. Those are small ones. You can build maybe 10 to 20 megawatts. But if you need 3 gigawatts, 3,000 megawatts, you need about 100 of them. Those MNRs, you call them modular nuclear reactors and so on. So perhaps it can be done, but definitely in the Luzon grid, you have about 12 to 14 gigawatts available power. So you imagine remove 25%, that 3 gigawatts. So that's a lot to
So
take
in other
out
words,
from the
Doctor-
Luzon grid.
So in other words, Doctor, it's possible, but we
It's
must
possible,
tread
but-
with caution.
I think, we have to have a lot of precautionary measures as far as the impacts on water supply, power, ecological impact, and even social, as far as social, cultural.
And as our last question, sir, Senator Pia Cayetano asked for a Philippine water sustainability framework. What is the top thing that we need to look at for that?
Sustainability nowadays, we talk about water security. So water security includes not only available water for, domestic or irrigation and so on, but also water security from the point of view of flood control, right? And then, of course, you have to also ensure that you have the right quality of water. So I think, you know, when we talk about integrated water resource management, these are all covered. Supply, you have quality, you have, of course, the demand, you know, demand side management and all those things. So I don't know exactly if it's leading towards that. Of course, we have always been looking for that supposedly apex body, a department that will manage the whole gamut of water resources from sources to the users and control of waters, but it hasn't happened.
So we'll see if we can maybe explore having a Department of Water soon. And well, hopefully we will also meet our Sustainable Development Goal number 6
Yes.
of everyone having access to clean water. So thank you so much, Dr.
Thank you so
Tabios.
much for inviting me.
Thank you for joining us this morning. And that's Business 360. I'm Margaux Salcedo. Thank you for joining us. Keep it here on BNC, the Bilyonaryo News Channel.